Okay, so I'm going to be giving a critical review of the debate between Deacon Hakah and then Dalton Jr. The debate lasted for over 3 hours. I sat through the entire debate. I took extensive notes, and I want to do a review of what transpired. I'll do a review by rounds. There were 3 rounds and then a Q&A, and then there were conclusions. So I'm going to take it by rounds. Round 1, round 2, round 3, and then the Q&A. All right, so we're going to start with Deacon because he started round 1. In Deacon's round 1 position, he argues that archaeological evidence supports the location of Israel in the Middle East. He highlights several key archaeological findings. He talked about the Torah Temple, which is an ancient Hebrew temple from the Kingdom of Judah, dating back to around 950 BCE. And he argued that it supports the historical presence of Israelites in the region. He mentions Joshua's witness stone, which is erected in Shechem, and he argued that this stone is part of the archaeological evidence of ancient Israelite settlements. He brought up the Dead Sea Scrolls, which he argued that was discovered in the 1947s. That these scrolls are crucial archaeological finds that contain ancient Hebrew texts, which further anchors Israel's historical location. He talked about the Moabite stone, which is dated to around 840 BCE, and it contains a significant Canaanite inscription indicating the historical interactions in the region. And then he mentions the Merneptah Stele, this monument, which includes the first known reference to the Israelites, reinforcing their historical presence in the Middle East. He talked about the Hinnom Scrolls, which are amongst the oldest known texts, with passages from the Hebrew Bible, which he argues which I discovered in 1979. He talked about the Tel Dan Stele, found in 1933, which he argues contains an inscription which mentions the house of David, linking the biblical narratives. He talked about the Lachish reliefs. These narrate, according to him, the Assyrian victory over Judah, providing evidence of historical events in the region. So Deacon also argues against the idea that sub-Saharan Africa was the location of these historical events, citing a lack of archaeological evidence for invasions or conquest by Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, or Romans in sub-Saharan Africa. He references biblical passages to support his claim that the land of Israel is currently occupied by others, as prophesied. So in his first round, Deacon referenced the following Bible passages to support his claim. He referenced Luke 21 verses 24. This passage he used to suggest that the land of Israel would be occupied by Gentiles until a certain time is fulfilled. He also referenced Leviticus 26:32. This verse he cited to indicate that enemies would possess the land of Israel, aligning with his argument about the current occupation of the land. So, in all, Deacon's first round is well structured and relies heavily on archaeological evidence to support his argument that the Holy Land is located in the Middle East, specifically where modern day Israel is. He effectively uses a combination of archaeological findings and biblical references to bolster his position. His argument is logical and grounded in tangible evidence, which can be persuasive to an audience that value historical and archaeological data. However, the effectiveness of his argument will ultimately depend on the audience's perspective on the weight of archaeological evidence versus other forms of evidence or interpretation. So this is a summary of round one for Deacon. Okay, now, in Ron Dalton Jr.'s round one position, he challenges the conventional archaeological evidence presented by Deacon, arguing that the Holy Land is actually in sub-Saharan Africa. Here are his key points. Number one, skepticism of archaeological evidence. Dalton Jr. questions the reliability of archaeological findings, emphasizing issues like the lack of context, chain of custody, and the potential for artifacts to be moved and misrepresented. Number two, lack of visual evidence. He points out that the absence of video or photographic evidence of historical invasions by Assyrians, Babylonians, and Persians suggests that such events might not have occurred as traditionally believed. Number three, he talked about Gentile influence. Dalton Jr. argues that Gentiles have historically manipulated narratives, including the crafting of the Council of Nicaea to obscure the true identity of Israelites, whom he associates with people of African descent. He talked about geographical and biological indicators. He contrasts the geography and wildlife of Israel with that of Africa, noting that the high elevations and diverse fauna of Central Africa align more closely with biblical descriptions. He mentioned historical artifacts. Dalton Jr. highlights that many significant artifacts, like the Lachish relief and the Meneptah stele, were found outside of Israel, in places like Iraq and Egypt, questioning their connection to the current location of Israel. He talked about cultural and linguistic shifts. He questions how quickly Israelites supposedly adopted Greek language and culture after Alexander the Great's conquest, suggesting a disconnect with historical timelines. He mentions genetic evidence. Dalton Jr. claims to have genetic proof of Assyrian and Babylonian presence in sub-Saharan Africa, supporting his argument for the Holy Land location. And then he criticizes modern Israel. He argues that the current geographical features of Israel do not match biblical descriptions, such as the high mountains of Israel, and accuses modern narratives of being fabrication. So, Dalton Jr.'s argument is built on challenging established narratives and presenting an alternative view that places the Holy Land in Africa, supported by a mix of geographical, cultural, and genetic claims. In his first round, I must say, Ron Dalton Jr. did not explicitly reference specific Bible passages to support his claim. Instead, he focused on questioning the archaeological and historical narratives and presented alternative interpretations and evidence, such as geographical and genetic indicators, to argue for the location of the Holy Land in sub-Saharan Africa. Ron Dalton Jr.'s first round is intriguing and challenges conventional narratives by questioning the reliability of archaeological evidence and proposing an alternative location for the Holy Land in sub-Saharan Africa. I must say that his approach is bold, relying on skepticism of established historical accounts and emphasizing geographical and genetic arguments. So, where are his strengths? Critical thinking. Dalton Jr. effectively questions the chain of custody and context of archaeological findings, encouraging the audience to reconsider accepted narratives. Then we come to alternative perspective. By proposing a different geographical location, he introduces a fresh perspective that can provoke thought and discussion. Where are his areas of improvement? I would say number one is lack of specific biblical references. While he challenges existing narratives, his argument could be strengthened by directly citing specific biblical passages to support his claims. This is just the first round. I'm not talking in general, just the first round. And then evidence presentation. Providing more concrete evidence, such as detailed genetic studies or historical documents, could bolster his argument. But overall, Dalton's round is thought-provoking and encourages a re-examination of historical assumptions, though it could benefit from more direct evidence and scriptural support. What are the strong points from each party in round one? In round one, both Deacon and Ron Dalton Jr. present strong points that bolster their respective positions. Deacon's strong points. Number one, archaeological evidence. Deacon effectively uses archaeological findings to support the traditional view that the Holy Land is located in the Middle East, specifically in modern-day Israel. This reliance on tangible evidence can be persuasive to those who value historical artifacts and documented discoveries. Number two, biblical references. He references specific Bible passages such as Luke 21 verses 24 and Leviticus 26 verses 32 to align scriptural prophecy with historical evidence, reinforcing his argument with religious texts. Number three, logical structure. His argument is well organized, presenting a clear narrative that connects archaeological evidence with biblical prophecy, making it accessible and compelling to the audience. Now, Ron Dalton Jr.'s strong points. Number one is critical examination of evidence. Ron Dalton challenges the reliability of archaeological evidence by questioning the chain of custody and the potential for artifacts to be moved and misrepresented. This critical approach encourages the audience to reconsider accepted narratives. Number two, alternative geographical argument. He presents a bold alternative by suggesting that the Holy Land is in sub-Saharan Africa, supported by geographical and genetic indicators. This fresh perspective can provoke thought and discussion, And then number 3, cultural and historical critique. Dalton Jr. critiques the historical narratives and cultural shifts, such as the rapid adoption of Greek language and culture by Israelites, which can resonate with audience skeptical of traditional historical accounts. So both parties present compelling arguments, with Deacon focusing on established archaeological and biblical evidence, while Dalton Jr. challenges these narratives with critical analysis and alternative interpretations. So, who is the round 1 winner? Based on the arguments presented and the supporting evidence, Deacon appears to have a stronger position in round 1. His use of well-documented archaeological evidence and specific biblical references provides a solid foundation for his claim, aligning with widely accepted historical and theological perspectives. Ron Dalton Jr.'s argument, while thought-provoking and challenging conventional narratives, rely more on speculative interpretations and lack the same level of academic support. His alternative perspective is intriguing, I must say, but does not have the same evidential backing as Deacon's position. Therefore, I would say that Deacon's approach, grounded in established evidence, gives him the edge in this round.